Today, very briefly get started with paper 2, international relations. Okay. So before we try to understand the nature of international relations in section A or Indian foreign policy in section B, we first got to understand the emergence of the present international system. From where did this present international system emerge? Okay. Now, you know that the roots of the present international system can be traced to, what is that treaty? The Treaty of Westphalia. The Treaty of Westphalia had given birth to the present international system. Okay, the basis for the present international system can be traced to the Treaty of Westphalia. The Treaty of Westphalia took place in 1648, when all the nation states realized, when all the governments realized the futility of war. Now please remember that this was the time when the medieval period was coming to an end and the modern period was slowly entrenching itself. I told you that this transition between the medieval and the modern period was characterized by wars. These were what were called as religious wars, isn't it? Okay. So the medieval period was characterized by feudalism. Okay. Now, why we are doing this here at this juncture is because these thinkers have contributed to the evolution from the medieval to the modern times, isn't it? That's the reason why I told you that these thinkers are the basis for our understanding of political science. Okay. So there was Machiavelli somewhere here. Okay. There was Thomas Hobbes somewhere here. There was John Locke also somewhere here, isn't it? Okay. Now, the medieval period was characterized by feudalism and the king and the papal authority. Okay. They connived with the feudal elements to suppress the individuals. We discussed that, isn't it? But with the advent of the modern time, the papal authority was being questioned. Okay. And the claim of church to unconditional loyalty and allegiance of individuals was now being disputed. Okay. People were dissatisfied with the religious orthodoxy of the Roman Catholic Church, and there was a new movement called the Protestant movement. Okay. And some of these feudal lords supported the Catholics and some of these feudal lords supported the Protestants. That led to a war called the 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War, okay, between the Catholic and Protestants. Okay, that was called, one was called as the Protestant Union, the other one was called as the Catholic League. Yeah, this was called as the Catholic League. This was one group of feudal lords. The other one was called as the Protestant Union, supported by several other feudal lords. Okay. So the war between the Catholic League and the Protestant Union was a 30 Years' War. So war continued. It was very bloody. Okay. And people had, been very ruthless and people began to commit murders on the name of religion and God. Okay. Now this led to a lot of dissatisfaction. After 30 years, all these leaders, they came together, they sat and they decided that enough is enough. Okay. Let us not fight anymore. The war is futile. And therefore, they entered into a treaty to end this 30 Years' War called the Treaty of Westphalia. The Treaty of Westphalia gave rise to some principles. The first principle was the principle of freedom of faith. Let every individual have his freedom. Let every kingdom have its own freedom. If you want to adopt Protestant ethics, adopt them. If you want to stick to Catholic orthodoxy, stick to them. You have your own faith. So everybody shall have their own religious faith. Every kingdom shall have its own religious faith. So let not Catholics impose themselves over Protestant and let not Protestants impose themselves over Catholics. That was the first principle that was accepted through the Treaty of Westphalia. The second principle that came out of the Treaty of Westphalia was pacific settlement of disputes. Let us not resort to war. Let us try to resolve our disputes in a pacific manner. Third, the Treaty of Westphalia also gave rise to the idea of the sovereign state system. It formally recognized what was called as a nation state. It formally recognized the nation state. Okay. Now you understand what's a nation state, isn't it? A nation is a group of people who share a sense of belonging to each other, and when this group of people who share a sense of belonging to each other are organized under one political authority, we call that as a nation state. So, nation states were now formally acknowledged through this treaty. Even now also, even today also, the basic unit of the international system is nation state. Even now also, India is a nation state. Pakistan is a nation state. US is a nation state. China is a nation state. Okay? We're all having nation states today. Okay? So the basis of the present international system also is nation state. And this idea of nation state was for the first time given formal recognition by the Treaty of Westphalia of 1648. Okay? So the basis for the present international system can be traced to this treaty. Right? Okay? So this treaty recognized that the nation states shall exercise sovereignty. Okay. 2. That these nation states will have their own recognized boundaries. Okay. Political boundaries. Okay. They shall exercise control within their borders, and there shall be no outside interference. Today also, what we do inside our country is our wish, isn't it? Pakistan and China have got no business to tell us what we do inside. If Government of India abrogates Article 370, it abrogates it. That's it. Okay? We have the power to take our decisions internally. Okay? So the sovereign state system or the concept of nation state recognize the principle of non-interference. So whatever you do inside your borders, inside your boundaries, is your wish. We are not going to interfere. Okay? So, inviolable political borders, the concept of state sovereignty, the principle of non-interference, itlanti principles anni kuda they took their birth through the Treaty of Westphalia. That was how the international system for the first time took its birth. Okay? And after this, the concept of nation state got entrenched, and we had witnessed the unification of nation states, right? So there were several movements for unification. For example, I told you, if you remember, Machiavelli had the vision of Italian unification. Italians, who constituted one nation, they were dispersed in various kingdoms. Some of the Italian dominated territories were within Austria. Some of the Italian dominated territories were with France. Okay? Italians అత్యధికంగా ఉన్న ప్రాంతాలు రకరకాల కింగ్డమ్స్ లో డిస్ట్రిబ్యూట్ అయిపోయి ఉన్నాయన్నమాట. Okay? So they wanted to achieve unification. Can you tell me who was that very great statesman who ultimately realized the vision of Italian unification? Bismarck, German unification, sir. Very good. Very, very good. German unification was finally achieved by a statesman called Otto von Bismarck. Okay, he was very famous for a policy that he followed. Any idea what his policy was called? His policy was called the blood and iron policy. His policy was called as the blood and iron. Okay, ruthless diplomacy. He employed any means to realize the unification of Germany. Okay, he deceived the kings, he deceived the statesmen, and he employed diplomacy. Okay, he sent some false telegrams also to other kings, making them commit aggression on Prussia and then Germany. Okay, so that they could be defeated and German unification could be formed. A lot of underhand ways were adopted by Bismarck, and that policy was called as the blood and iron policy. And Italian unification was finally, realized by the manipulations and the diplomatic genius by a person called Count di Cavour. Okay, right? He was instrumental in the formation of Italian unification. Okay, so slowly these nation states got entrenched, and we saw Spanish, the Portuguese, the Italians, the French, the Germans, the English, all of them formed into nation states. Okay, however, this unification process had led to rivalries. It gave rise to rivalries. Along with this, there was also this race for colonies. You know that French and English have fought series of wars for gaining control over India, isn't it? Can you tell me what was that battle which finally established the British supremacy over all other European rivals? Battle of Buxar actually established British supremacy in North India. Battle of Buxar established Battle of Vandewash. Very good. The Battle of Vandewash established British supremacy in India over other European rivals. Okay, Battle of Vandewash. There used to be a lot of rivalries. So, after the formation of the first international system, the European continent, okay, had witnessed a series of rivalries. There were two important reasons. Okay, the business of unification. The business of unification was one reason, and the second reason was a race for colonies. Rivalries over, imperialist ambitions. So all this led to, rivalries within European continent. So the 30 Years' War, Treaty of Westphalia, subsequent unification, and race for colonies, okay, and that led to a lot of disturbance, conflicts, and wars, right? So the Treaty of Westphalia, which was supposed to bring about a relative peace, had actually resulted in intense rivalries among the European powers. Diplomacy was being employed, okay, right? And the international system was anarchic. We had an anarchic international system. Make India and the world ayinda, India's foreign policy, India and the world ayinda, avvaleda inka. Meeku eppudu avutundani meeku mottam coaching మార్చ్ అవుతుందా? మార్చ్ వరకు మీకు కోచింగ్ అవుతుందా? అంటే ప్రిలిమినరీ మెయిన్స్ అన్ని కలిపా? నెక్స్ట్ ప్రిలిమినరీకి 1 month అవుతుందా? ఓకే, రైట్. సో ద ఇంటర్నేషనల్ సిస్టమ్ ఇస్ కన్సిడర్డ్ టు బి అనర్కిక్. ఓకే, మీరు డోంట్ వెయిట్ ఫర్ థింగ్స్, కీప్ డూయింగ్ యువర్ వర్క్ as far as general studies is concerned. Okay, start doing your work, right? At least political science lo at least oka paper complete chestamo, and a good number of other elements also be completing as a part of political science. But still, you also start doing things. Don't depend on the schedules of the coaching institutes. They will do it at their pace, at their convenience, and that might not be convenient for your preparation, isn't it? So, okay, so the international system that was created through the Treaty of Westphalia was an anarchic international system. What do you mean by anarchy? Anarchy is lawlessness. Okay, there was no international law. There was no order. There were no rules and regulations as far as the international system was concerned. So anybody who had more power, they imposed over the others. So international law ledu, international system lo elanti rules and regulations levu. India today insists that we should have a rules based international order. Okay, appat nunche there was no rules based international order, ippadi kuda levu. Okay, therefore whatever was operating at the international system was the jungle law. If you are more powerful, do whatever you want. Okay, so what was operating in the international system at that time was jungle law, and that international system was described as anarchic international system. Okay, right. So today also Russia occupies Ukraine. What is the international community able to do about this? Nothing much, isn't it? Supplying food to Ukraine, ante kada, right? Imposing sanctions, okay, which probably is not seriously hurting Russia, isn't it? Because they also need the natural gas from Russia, isn't it? The European countries also need natural gas from Russia. Therefore, international system is also anarchic today, right? International law is not properly entrenched. It was the same scenario then. Therefore, what do you do when you are faced up with a situation of anarchy, where there is no law, there is no police to establish order, there is no judge, there are no courts, there is no regulatory mechanism, you're all by yourself. What do you do? To protect yourself, what do? You become more and more powerful. Okay? So, the states in this international system began to pursue power. Okay? So, pursuit of power became the most effective way through which countries sought to protect themselves, protect their sovereignty. Okay? That, of course, led to two consequences. One was arms race. The second was formation of secret alliances. Okay? It led to formation of secret alliances. Okay? So this was the scenario initially when the first international system was formed. Okay? So the system of secret alliances was employed. Countries began to engage in arms race with each other. Okay? Countries began to, engage in self-help. Okay? Because they cannot depend on others, isn't it? Okay? And this ultimately led to what was very popularly called as security dilemma. Have you heard this term, Pranit? Can you elaborate on what this is? Even today also countries suffer from this. What is it? Okay. Dilemma is that you are not aware of the true intentions of the other country. Because what they say, what claims they make, what appeals they do, they're completely different from what their true motivations are. In a scenario where no country is able to estimate the threat or anticipate the strength of the rival, the only way the countries would want to protect themselves and their security is by expanding their military capabilities. That's the only way that countries can ensure that their security remains protected, isn't it? Now, when a country is expanding its military capabilities, the other country will automatically feel threatened, isn't it?